If you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. Friends, grasshoppers, this is the Formless Podcast, episode 98. 98. With Tyler the Superhuman and me, Dustin. Today, we have a special guest all the way from Israel, author of many books, an infantryman, former police investigator, teacher, and martial artist, Shifu, Jonathan Bluestein. Welcome.
My honor and pleasure to be with you here today.
Thank you very much, sir. If you don't mind, would you give us a little bit of an origin story, how you got started, who you are, that sort of thing?
Origin story. Well, you want the origin of the origin. A lot of people say, I watched that Bruce Lee movie and I got hyped, right? For me, I'm a little bit younger. So for me, that was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, perfect.
Same here.
Yeah. I watched that as a kid and I'm like, that's the stuff. That's my earliest memory of martial arts. That's the coolest thing as a kid. And then later on, when I was 16, I got into Western boxing. Did that for 2 years, followed by Okinawan Karate. I did Western boxing with Coach Ranan Tal. Still, he's coaching boxing, Muay Thai, and MMA. He's up there in Toronto, I think. He's a really excellent fellow. Then I did Okinawan Karate with Itzy Cohen Sensei, who through the years, as I became a teacher later, he became a very good friend of mine. Itzy Cohen Sensei, also an author. Got the really excellent, if you're looking for really good books on the history of Okinawan Karate, he's got his books on Amazon. He's a real serious historian on that topic. So 2 years boxing, 5 years in Okinawan Karate, and then the rest of my 22 years or so in the martial arts I got in the Chinese arts. In Chinese arts, I had 6 teachers, so quickly in succession. It's Shifu Nitan Oren, his teacher, my Shigong, Zhou Jingxuan, may he rest in peace, from China, Shifu Sapir Tal, Shifu Professor Stephen Jakovitz, Shifu Brian Hall, and Shifu Yang Hai, who was a good friend of mine for many years and recently became my teacher also in Baghuazhang. So these are my teachers, and I learned various Chinese styles from periods ranging from lately like maybe the Cheng style Bagua I've been doing for maybe 1.5 years. Some other things I did for maybe 3 years. Other things I've been doing 5, 10, 20 years. So briefly, like the ones that I focused on most, Xingyi Huazhang, Jukum Southern Mantis, Baghuazhang of different lineages. You could say a little bit of Chen Shi Tai Chi Chuan, Chen style Tai Chi. And nowadays, like my main thing that I do is the Li family system of Southern Shaolin. Now it's a lot of stuff. Sorry for like throwing it in there. I just have the habit of, I like to mention my teachers. I think a lot of people, it's all about themselves. You go on their website or they go on a podcast and they talk like me, and they forget to talk about the people who gave them everything. And for me, my teachers are most important because if it wasn't for them, I wasn't here. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been the person that I am today. And I think it's even, and this is an important message for martial artists out there, whether you're teachers or students, martial arts are an imperfect endeavor. They can be splendid and spiritual and amazing and really take a person like up a notch in life and in many sorts of endeavors and enterprises. But martial arts can get ugly. Just published a book about this. We're going to talk about this one, Martial Arts Politics Explained. And when it gets ugly, just remember your teacher is still your teacher. So you can have a misunderstanding with your teacher, you can have a falling out with your teacher, but nevertheless, they are still your teacher. They still taught you. And the Chinese say teacher for one day is a parent for a lifetime. So my teachers, Shifu Nitan, Shigong Zhou, Shifu Sapir, Professor Shifu Stephen Jakovitz, Shifu Brian, and Shifu Yanghai. Those 6 teachers of mine are my parents in some ways and teachers for life. And even those amongst them with whom I'm not studying currently, I'm still good friends with them. I keep in touch. I pay my respects, and I would highly recommend anybody to study under them and their styles. They're amazing.
Respect for your roots. I like that a lot.
That's
good. Good stuff. Well,
that's something in our art too that's really important, is that our sensei always is drilling into us, into new students, is knowing your lineage and where you come from, and so we have the privilege of the grandmaster of our art, Wu Ying Dao. He's actually still alive, and then he trained his students under him, who then trained another teacher, who trained a teacher, who trained our teacher, and then here we are. And so that's something super important in our art as well, is lineage and giving respect to those that came before us.
We are literally walking in their footsteps, right? In martial arts, it's not metaphorical. We are walking the steps that they laid out for us. And I think that people who practice every day for many years, and they practice a style, it's almost as if they can hear the whispers of those ancestors in their ear telling them, like, dude, move your foot a little bit that way and a little bit that way. Your body knows because they laid out the plan.
Yeah, exactly. So now, do you currently run a school?
Yeah, I have a small martial arts school here in Israel. I'm keeping the martial arts on somewhat of a low flame right now, because I shifted my focus a little bit into Chinese medicine in recent years. So the only reason I used to have a much larger school a number of years ago, but then just to absorb the immensity of Chinese medicines, like literally thousands of years of experience and literature, and it's much better documented usually than martial arts. It's a big thing to get into your life and to develop a second career in that. So I kept a handful of students that I teach regularly, but I focused on Chinese medicine a little bit more, and I haven't been advertising or marketing my martial arts classes at all.
Okay.
And it's fine. Sometimes I practice every day, of course, several hours a day, but sometimes in order to bring something exceptional into your life, you got to have compromises, right? And eventually traditional Chinese martial arts and traditional Chinese medicine are like that. They are completely integrated culturally, mechanically, philosophically, energetically, you name it. In my personal view, it's not that each of them has an agenda to combine with the other, but the combination, if you like to make it, can be completely seamless.
Wow.
Quite a thing. We can talk about it if you'd like.
Well, sure. That's a completely new concept to me. I knew a married couple that had trained in China for acupuncture, and they called themselves doctors. I assume they received a doctorate, but they knew a lot about, or they claimed to know a lot about Chinese medicine. This was pre-COVID, and since I've lost contact with them. But they had some really interesting stories, but they never mentioned martial arts. Not that I can recall. So that's new to me.
I mean, the martial arts are not integrated into Chinese medicine. They sort of align with one another. They let's just say it's like there are two kids who grew up in close by buildings in the same neighborhood.
Okay.
They're inseparable. They had the same experiences. They knew the same people. They talked the same language. They have the same slang, the same dialect. They ate the same foods. They're still not the same people.
Yeah.
And they might have not even met sometimes. And it's usually the situation, right? The majority of Chinese martial arts teachers do not practice Chinese medicine. The majority of Chinese medicine practitioners do not practice martial arts. But then again, same neighborhood, adjacent buildings, same culture, same talk, same slang, same food, same community, same everything.
Very.
So those two people meet, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, like I've known you all my life." Of course, you grew up in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. You have the same mannerisms, the same ideologies and things like that.
Well, so
I'll give you an example that would just manifest this in a very concrete way for listeners to get a hang of what I mean. Right. So in martial arts, everybody knows yin and yang. If you're doing Chinese martial arts, you know what yin and yang are. It's like hard and soft, up and down, inside and outside, black and white. Everybody knows. So same thing, exact same thing in Chinese medicine. So say a person lays on the treatment table, and the first questions you're asking are pertain to yin and yang. For example, are they hot or cold? Mm-hmm. That's a key question that, doctors, Western medicine doctors, they ask that question if somebody catches a cold, if they say that they're sick, but they don't often ask that question, not often enough, when the person does not come in with an infectious disease. In Chinese medicine, it's very central. Are you a person that prefers heat or prefers cold? And you touch their bodies. Is the body hot or cold? That's going to tell you a whole lot about that person. How much energy do they have? Like, how much metabolic energy? What's going on with their kidneys? Can their kidneys create this metabolic heat that heats them up? Maybe that's weak. Or maybe it's excess. That's the other thing I'm going to get to in a moment. They have too much heat. You haven't even laid a hand on them. It's like an oven. Whoa, that person's hot. And their skin is reddish. And they're like a little oven, and you're thinking, what's going on here? Why is all that yang, that heat, right? Heat, yang. Why is it on the outside? Or maybe it's not on the outside, but you press a little bit. On the inside, they're very warm, but on the outside, they're not. Oh, that's a yin-yang dynamic. Interesting. Then another question you can ask is, it is very important, are they excess or are they deficient? Now, what is meant by excess or deficiency? Very simple. Some people have too much. Some people have too little. Resources. That's a concept in Western medicine too. Did you take too many supplements and now those vitamins or minerals are in excess and that's causing issues for you? That's classic excess. You have too much of some stuff. You could have people take calcium, for example. As many people are not aware, you take too much calcium and it's too much for you. Body thinks like, what am I gonna do with all that calcium? Okay, I'm just gonna put it in the bones. More and more and more, it becomes like little calcium nodules, like round things on your bones. It doesn't have a place to put it, so it just puts this mineral in the bones. It's too much, excess. Other people, you see that lady, she's all skinny and frail, and it's like kind of coldish in here. And I feel very anxious here today, You see that lady, and she's all pale, and you can see her bluish veins all over. That's a deficiency. That's very yin, as opposed to that very young person, big rumbling voice. You look at Donald Trump. I'm not getting into general politics today, but look at Donald Trump, at his constitution. I'm not talking about the U.S. Constitution, of the bodily constitution. That's an excess person. That's like, whoa, he's like out there, all like exploding. He's like big, massive, like massive aura. Like he's so excess that he takes him like, it's only now, it's like a very relatively older age that he gets a little milder where all this yang is just starting to slowly go down. That's how biologically powerfully built he is, and his dad seems to have been like that too. You look at other people like AOC, and again, not comparing politics, just body structure, okay? Very gentleish movements, slim, talks in a very mild voice, and she's not angry. Very, very, very gentle, right? You can't say she's pale because her natural, beautiful skin color is not a pale color, but relative to people with that skin color, sometimes she's palish. Again, relative to her skin color, I would hedge my bets. She's more of a, if she was to be treated with Chinese medicine, more of a deficiency patient.
And an
A little bit
excess.
more, maybe a little bit, maybe she's not anemic, but maybe she is like leaning towards, if she wouldn't eat right, she's a person who could easily become anemic, for example. It's different constitutions, and it's not one is better than the other at all. It's like everybody has their, like an excess person like Trump. If that excess is not regulated, they can easily have high blood pressure, they can easily have a stroke, gain a lot of weight. That's excess person. Deficiency person, they can get vertigo more easily, they can faint, they can feel colder. So it's just generalization, but it gets the idea across. Now, if you learn this through Chinese medicine, then your martial arts also get very interesting, at least as a teacher, because you look at the students, hey, that's more yinish student, that's more yangish student, that's a deficient student, that's an excess student. And everybody has their leanings one way or another, at least a little. And you see, oh, they also study and they practice their martial arts based on their constitution. That changes a lot of stuff as a teacher that you wouldn't have thought about if you hadn't known Chinese medicine.
I teach twice a week, and I haven't thought of that. That's a really good. I like that a lot. I'll start thinking about that. That's really cool.
And that's actually, so even a long time before I understood those things, that's something that sort of pushed me in the direction of Chinese medicine, because I would see my students suffering from all sorts of stuff. I mean, we all have, as we grow older, there's nobody that's not going to suffer from at least a few medical issues throughout their lives, some minor, some major. And I looked at my students and, this guy would have a pain here and that guy would have like heartburn and the other guy's going to have digestive issues and that guy came in with a headache. And you look at that and you think, as a teacher, I wish I could help them somehow. And that's what got me interested originally in Chinese medicine. I thought, I wish I could do something, at least a little thing for them. And nowadays that's the case. Very often I would offer treatments to my students, even do a little thing in class just to allow them to train better that day. Like even realigning their vertebrae, like chiropractic like maneuver, which you can do sometimes with the patient sitting or standing, just that sort of stuff. You do something for a minute or two or less, that can change how that person can function in the class, and that can have benefits.
Absolutely. If they're more present, then they're more able to learn, more able to participate. Yeah, very cool. So I've a couple questions for you. Some of it relates to the book, some of it loosely. But one of the things that I really wanted to ask you, there's two. What is your definition of internal martial arts?
Controversial indeed. I've written a whole book on this topic. The book is on Amazon. It's called Research of Martial Arts. Research. It's a very popular book. It was the first book that I published back in the year 2014. It still sells well. I think it's because it became, just for lack of other people writing about the topic, there's not a lot of books on this topic exactly. It is the most extensive book on like comparison between internal, external martial arts and everything around that and beyond. So internal martial arts, let's just say what internal martial arts are not. They're not superior to other martial arts because they're called internal. They do not give you magical chi powers to transform the universe and become ultra wealthy and cure every disease and be the second coming of Jesus. That's not it.
Okay.
They do not allow you to hold a pair of jalapeno peppers and have another guy hold onto them from the other side and make them hop, like I've actually seen infamously a YouTube video of some certain teacher doing. So let's just say internal martial arts are still martial arts. So by the end of the day, they are just a grouping of Chinese martial arts that are intended to provide people with a venue to practice, to have fun, to become stronger, more vigorous, healthier, happier versions of themselves, and know how to actually protect themselves in the meanwhile. And whole shebang that you get in other martial arts as well. That being said, okay, we want to understand what internal martial arts are. We go back to how martial arts developed. Dustin and Tyler are sitting in this Chinese village 2,000 years ago. They go like, dude, I hit the guy's face yesterday like that. Worked pretty well. That Tyler says this, and then Dustin says, yo, I hit him like this. That worked even better. And they say, how about we do this and then it is? Wow, that's great. Now they have a kata, or at least a combination exercise. And people basically take the violence that works for them or that they think worked for them. They create systems of movement. And over time, the East Asians, Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese, the Vietnamese, the Malaysians and other people, and of course the Indians in the middle of Asia, they say, well, if we're already having this like system of movement, this method of exercise, how about we put some culture in it? And you think, well, that's sort of weird. Like, why would I put, say, some people, for example, in India, it's more common. They put like traditional music sometimes into the thing. In China, they did it sometimes as well, like in modern times. Or in Japan, where they put like in some schools, it's not as common, but they might put little Shinto shrines inside of the school, and that's a religious attribute. And you'd think, isn't it strange putting culture in like system of, practiced violence? But when we really think about it, we do similar things with like, our Western sports as well. I mean, you go to Gold's Gym. For people who don't know, that's a very famous bodybuilding gym in California.
Yeah.
The place is a shrine for bodybuilding culture. It's full of posters and statues and autographed paintings and celebrities coming in, and they put like this very specific music that vibes, with everything that goes on there. And there's a whole and there are documentaries made about it. So they took something like bodybuilding, which is very physical, can be very technical, and they brought a whole lot of culture into it. So we did this with bodybuilding. So obviously, the East Asians and the Indians, they would do this with their martial arts. So it makes sense. So then it rolls on and on for thousands of years. Then, at some point, they started thinking about a certain aspect to the martial arts in East Asia that wasn't as well considered or commonly considered, say, in Western martial arts that we know of throughout history. And that aspect is, well, Mr. Zhang and Mr. Chiang looking around, see a hospital over here, over there, yonder. No, not for 500 miles. There's no hospital. Because there's just no hospitals in ancient times in China or anywhere almost. And, they got the village doctor if they're lucky. So they're thinking, all right, I know how to gather some herbs. I know how to do like a little bit of basic medicine, basic first aid. But what are we going to do if we want to keep ourselves healthy, given that nobody's going to call an ambulance? And people don't think about that. That in ancient times, like people say, like, why weren't they sparring every day? By the way, which is a fashion in modern sports martial arts that's falling out of favor. Nowadays, there's a lot of people in boxing, in Muay Thai, in MMA that talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't be sparring every day. Maybe that's not a great idea. Maybe you could just spar once a week or once every 2 weeks, and that's fine too. And you can do like super light sparring, and you can do all the other drills, and you can work the bag hard, and you can do your weight training, and you don't need to bash one another to death every single day. Because even with ambulances and everything, like medical costs are a thing. You got medical costs. So nowadays people start to think about it too. But the East Asians thought about it thousands of years ago, and they think, well, given we do not have any medical support, acute or chronic, that's like readily available for everybody, and even when we have it, doesn't mean that's really great in most places. What are we going to do? Well, the only way to keep everybody healthy is to make the practice really healthy. And that's when they start pushing the health-oriented aspects into martial arts. That's health-oriented aspects. Spiritual stuff too, I'm getting to it. Because another thing I didn't get to is they need to work the fields. They need to feed the village, right? They got their rice fields going on. They got the farm animals. Everybody, like in season, everybody works 12, 14 hours a day doing something. They might rotate what they do, but they do something. There's a whole lot of work on the farm. And most people in ancient times, like over 96% of Chinese people in ancient times were farmers. So we need every able-bodied person working together with the rest of the village. We can't have that guy with backaches at the age of 40 or 50 because he was sparring every day. We're not going to have food. Yeah. We're not going to have food. Like, it's a big deal. We get 4 of these guys injured, the whole village is going to have less food. So they're starting thinking smarter. So they're starting thinking, okay, so how are we going to create martial arts that also have health benefits? That's how the health benefits get into all these East Asian martial arts that we know today. That's why they're relatively more healthful, or at least more health-oriented, usually, not always, compared to some sports martial arts from the West, which amazing martial arts, that doesn't mean that they're inferior in any way. They're just less health-oriented, created in different contexts in different time. And then they get influenced by the other cultural things around. They get influenced by their religions. One guy says, I go to the temple and I sit in meditation for 6 hours a day. Another guy says, screw that, I'm not going to be sitting in place for 6 hours a day. But I do want that enlightenment, though. That's really funky. That's interesting. Okay, how do I get that enlightenment from movement? Well, and it's not like they are on a quest. They're not on a crusade for anything. Because in the West, people are really obsessed. Like you see a lot of people, Western countries like Israel and in Europe, in the United States, like, I gotta do this. Like I gotta win. I gotta be the best at enlightenment. Gonna be like the enlightenment champion. The Chinese are like, yeah, whatever, sounds cool. Let's see if I can make something work along the way, like in between the farm chores and doing my martial arts. And it's not like, oh, they created the martial art for that. They're like, make it. What if I practice really slowly? What if I practice with intention? What if I take those breathing methods from that guy that was in the temple for 20 years? That's good for you, he said, and I feel good about it. Let's do it. It doesn't mean that they know what they're doing at the level of like a PhD in physiology and anatomy. It means that it worked for them. It worked for them for enough generations that little by little, pieces came into the arts. And then they develop a more complex language about martial arts. And that's when the internal martial arts start coming into the picture. But people start talking about, well, what if I don't have to focus as much on the opponent all the time, which is what we do in most martial arts. Like we are really into what is the opponent doing. What if I touch the opponent, and you guys do Wing Chun, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. What if through touch, I feel through my skin what the body of the opponent is doing. So instead of looking at him to know, I can feel it through my skin, through touch, through connection with him. My structure connects with his structure. Now, that's one aspect of internal, because the focus is inside rather than outside. I do not draw my attention outward towards him. I listen to what's happening in my body relative to what he is doing. So that's one aspect of internal. So the internal martial arts, a lot of people you'd see talk about internal energy, this, internal power, that. And that's just not what it's about.
That's
Internal martial arts is just martial arts that have a lot of different practice methods and mechanisms and exercises and ways to move the body and work the mind, the breathing, and other things. We can get to more of these mechanisms in a moment, that are very internalized. Pay attention to what you're doing, instead of at the expense or in parallel to paying attention to what the opponent's doing. Okay? Including, it's up to the level of, I see a person from afar, I can understand him based on how I feel inside. Which is why I say, I've written about this, I believe the highest level of martial arts is empathy. Why? Because you can consider the other person as a human being, and if you do, you can understand them. If you can understand them, you can anticipate them. And you're not anticipating them based on what they're going to do, and you're guessing, or you have experience, or you're watching the move and how they're going to do this. You anticipate them because you really resonate with them. A quick story, like 2 sentences before we move forward, is I saw a video, I think it was in Israel. So a mugger came into a convenience store at a gas station. And he comes in, he pulls out a knife, and there's a lady, the cashier, she looked to be, 23, 24 years old. And she comes from this like very hippish community, so very mellow, very like chill dude. And he comes in, it's like, give me all your money. I want the money. Don't give me trouble. Hold the money. Give me the money. She knows no martial arts, no self-defense, nothing. And very calmly, like, she starts reaching for the money and to give it to him. He's like, "Are you okay, brother? You seem distraught, man. Are you okay? What's going on? Why are you like this? Do you need anything?" And he was just so flabbergasted by how she behaved. And he wasn't, like, he did take the money and went, but he wasn't even close to being a threat to her, because she did not see him as a threat. She saw him as a person. Now, obviously, there are caveats to this, and somebody can be dragged out of their minds, or a psychopath or whatnot. And sometimes violence is the answer, and the empathy by itself is not going to solve everything. But that was a Jesus-like move on behalf of that lady, who really did this because she cared, not because she knew martial arts or anything, and it worked. She was unharmed, and she was not even close to being harmed. So that's what I'm talking about.
okay. That's a great story. I like that.
That is a great story. One of the things that I, as I've gotten older, right, is I feel like when we talk about like what you're talking about feeling skin to skin, right? You put your arm up and you do those drills, and you can feel what's going on in the other person as well as feel what's going on in you yourself. So I think as we get older, we become more in tune with that. Now, I think a younger person can absolutely train and get in tune with that, depending on a variety of things. But what's interesting that you talked about is you can look at someone and you can what was it you said? You understand where they're at, or you can feel where they're at, right?
Exactly.
What's interesting that I've noticed is as I've gotten older, and I've heard it described as mirror neurons. Is that something you're familiar with, mirror neurons?
Yeah, but I mean, mirror neurons is this thing, like this current thing that people talk about in academia and sometimes in martial arts and other fields. They say, "Oh, I look at another person, and I can rewire parts of my brain, rewire my neurons to match the person." And that's also how we learn. Like, we see a person moving their hand like this, we try to move our hand like this, and gradually, slowly, our mind, like inside of ourselves, we change to match them. Like, we mirror them. Our neurons literally mirror them. And we can do this in combat too. By mirroring, like this, we're basically connecting the mirror neurons to empathy here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by mirroring them, we can get deeper into their psyche. But I think it's much more than that, because that's the same problem that people have in medicine, where they're like, oh, this is a lung specialist, and that is a heart specialist, and that's a nephrologist, he deals with kidneys. They're all like bent on that particular organ and the set of problems that's associated with that organ. And you're a neurologist, like, oh, neurons, you're a brain researcher, it's like all in the neurons. Well, is it all in the neurons? I don't think it's all in the neurons. For example, humans have pheromones. Now, it's really interesting because the vast majority of humans, probably more than 99.999% of humans, cannot actually knowingly detect other people's pheromones. Like we can't compute, oh, this and that pheromones, and I'm going to react in this or that way. But nonetheless, we detect them and we react based on them. So we can actually react not just based on the mirror neurons, but also the pheromones and the energy that a person sends. Like chi is a thing. I can talk more about chi in a little bit, but there is, if anything, like people say, okay, I don't believe in chi, fine. But there is bioelectric energy. People have a bioelectric field. It's measurable. It's Western science. Mm-hmm. And we feel differences in anybody has had the experience of walking down the street or being in a place, being in a restaurant, being in a classroom, doesn't matter, and suddenly feeling there's an ominous energy about another person. Like, I don't want to spend time next to the person. I'm just gonna move my chair. I'm gonna step out of the room. I'm not gonna be here. Happens to all of us. We have, in some capacity, sensed their chi. Was it their neurons that we mirrored? Probably not that. Was it the pheromones? Could be. Was it the bioelectric energy or what? That's probably some type of chi. Pheromones are a type of chi. The bioelectric energy are a type of chi. It's all a type of chi. I'm sorry, my wife's friend just saying to me, I know, sweetie. Go ahead. Middle of interview.
Well, one of
the wife is a very strong chi in one's life.
Yes, I have intimate experience with that.
Yeah, so I the reason why I kind of bring that up is because I mean I had experience recently in the last several years. I've had several experiences like you talked about where I'm in a conversation with somebody, and it's usually somebody that I know, and maybe like I had a conversation with someone the other day, and we're just having a conversation, and we're actually talking about martial arts, and all of a sudden I started getting this feeling of anxiety inside me, and I was like, why am I getting this anxiety? This isn't like my feeling. Like this isn't organic to me. Like, and I thought about it, and then the conversation ended on a good term with somebody else, and I walked away, and I was like, I didn't start feeling nervous in that conversation talking about martial arts, and it was kind of like a different, like, oh, this style versus this style. And I was just like, hey, that's cool. Like, I want to train in that style as well. But there didn't seem to be a reciprocation for like acknowledgement of like our style, so to speak. And so I just had this feeling, like I walked away from that conversation, like, was that person starting to feel like a little
were they getting like anxious or nervous?
Yeah, were they getting anxious or nervous? Because I walked away, I was like, that wasn't me. Like I think I was picking up on their feeling. It could have been me, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I felt like I was picking up on them, and so I'm really much more in tune with that as I get older. What does that kind of go in line with what you were talking about, Jonathan?
Yes, exactly. And I think it's probably due not just getting older, actually more so your martial arts training over the years that gave you that edge. Because I'll tell you what happens to other people. What you just described, I think happens to everybody. But the difference is that the ordinary average person who has not had any psychophysical training, any special method to spiritually or energetically develop themselves, what happens to them is they sense exactly what you're talking about, and they don't know where it came from. and they can't even associate it necessarily to that conversation. So what happens to them is they go home, they might get depressed or they might get anxious. And it might be in delay even because they might hold on to the feeling, but the feeling may linger and then explode. And then maybe they find themselves a day later feeling terribly anxious and not knowing why the hell that happened. Or 3 days later, they might suddenly erupt at their spouse at the slightest provocation. And the spouse will be like, wow, where did that come from? And they're just in the middle of being angry and upset. And later they'd ask themselves, where did that come from? That wasn't me. That really wasn't them. But they wouldn't know whence it came from because they have not gone through the process training themselves to understand. That's also internal, by the way. That's an aspect of internal martial arts. I call it, you can call it internal psychotherapy. When you do, I think this happens with a lot of martial arts, not just internal martial arts. Just internal martial arts can, if the teacher is into that sort of thing, they can tune in the student. For example, in standing, practicing standing, Jianzhuang, like what they call static standing, which is not static actually. There's a whole lot that you're supposed to be doing that's going on inside of your body. As you get more advanced in the practice, those kinds of things. Well, anybody who tries to stand in one place and not move too much for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, are gonna find out that after they get past, if they get past, most people do not, the pain stage. So once it's no longer painful and you have to just stand there, then a lot of things arise in you, much like in meditation. This is why some people call it standing meditation, although this is incorrect because the practice of standing in the martial arts was never intended specifically for meditation, but it has meditative aspects to it, especially if that's the direction you want to take it. And when it happens, you feel a lot of things. Back in the day when I had more serious students, now my students, I see them at best twice a week, and they do some training at home. But alas, I do not have students like I used to have because I have yet to go back the model of a professional school, which is going to happen. Again, because I spend much time with Chinese medicine. Also, I'm a volunteer right now in the Iron Swords War. I travel across the country treating soldiers, and that takes up a lot of time. So, but way back when, I had soldiers. I'm always going to say I had students who were training every day, several hours a day. Then those students would find that, and they would see it in class, that sometimes they might get all anxious all of a sudden while standing, or have a few tears being shed. I'll be there to guide them through it. There'd be something arising in them that wasn't from the standing at all, from experiences back home, that day, the day before, traumas 10 years ago. They would release it because you can use the body to release your psyche. That's another thing you do in the internal arts. But it organically happens with every type of really good martial arts training. If you train long enough, at least some of that's going to happen. That's part of how people evolve as martial artists. Now, regrettably, as I've written in the book that you have there, Martial Arts Politics Explained, that doesn't mean that the person's going to be a better person. They're just going to be a better version of themselves. So if they're a villain, they're going to become a better villain. And this is just the truth. It's exactly the same. I think I've written this in the book. Exactly the same as somebody getting drunk. If I do not drink to excess. I usually would not drink more than one beer or one glass of wine. But if on the rare occasion every few years that I would get tipsy, I find that I become much nicer to people around me. And I'm very happy about it, that's what comes out. Some other people, what comes out is trauma and violence and unresolved things. So it shows what happens on the inside. So it's the same with martial arts. You can become, let's just say, a more capable of sullen, precise violence and doing harm to others if you solve your issues and you want to be that villain.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't happen in all martial arts. It's more commonly that people become real better people, but you can just be a better version of whatever you want to be, especially if you don't have proper guidance. And we all know, I mean, the book, can you show the book to potential readership there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that book is just jammed with such stories about, what happens when something hits the fan and it ain't pretty.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention about this book, first of all, it's a massive tome.
It's like practically a weapon, Jonathan. I could use it and just, whack someone across the face with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it should be kept in every single martial arts school. That's
there you go. Yes, but it's not a very difficult read. Meaning, there's some very deep topics and things in there, but I was impressed with the way the information was conveyed. It was very easy to open up and read and go, I understand this. This makes sense. Or I agree with this. Or I kind of see what you're saying there. But it wasn't like, I didn't have to like go over and read stuff over and over again because it was so, I didn't understand it. It was very, it felt like I was listening to somebody just tell a story.
Yeah.
It was very, very approachable. But when I first opened the box, I was like, oh my Lord, this is going to be tough, But it wasn't that at all. So thank you for that. But
thank you.
Yeah.
And it's a big font. It's
yes.
full picture.
Yes. Yes.
And it is said that if you understand something deeply, that you should be able to explain it simply, right?
Exactly. I was going to see if you. I was going to try and find a way to bring that up if you followed that same philosophy. I'm glad you did that. One of the things I wanted to ask you is what was your inspiration or idea behind writing this book? What made you go, this is a topic that hasn't been explored that I'd like to dig into?
Well, it was exactly as you said, that one day I was sitting with myself thinking, politics in the martial arts is something that all of us are talking about all the time. Who did this to that, and what happened there? Why did this school shut down? Why is it that, this guy is best friends with his teacher and that other guy is not talking with his teacher anymore? Why are those people fighting over rank? What is it about, why do people obsess over ranks anyway?
Mm-hmm.
What's the psychological and sociological and cultural mechanism there? Why is it that the culture of Japanese martial arts is so different to Chinese martial arts, and why do they even bicker and fight over it? Well, what's that story? And I have answers for a lot of those things. And I just figured, well, as far as I could tell, I searched and couldn't find anything that specifically targeted that broad topic. And one could understand why. It is a very controversial topic, and people are afraid to harm other people's feelings, or other cases that somebody's just gonna put an incendiary device under their car when they're not looking. That could happen too. People have been injured, maimed, and killed over martial arts disputes, even in the United States. There's a whole subculture of martial arts political warfare. I have sort of alluded to some of it in the book. And one would notice that the book attempts to be as polite as possible, even though it is controversial, it is funny, it is ludicrous, it's just out there. There's crazy stories in that tome. But if I had to say anything negative whatsoever about anybody, I changed the names, I changed the details, so people would get the gist of what really happened. Everything in there are true stories, but it's conveyed in a way that's not going to offend anybody too much, or if it is sometimes offensive and you cannot escape it, then at least nobody, or aside from say 10, 20 people, nobody's going to be able to know who those groups and people are that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I thought you did it pretty respectfully, all things considered, with the exception of Steven Seagal, maybe. But
Well, he earned it.
yes,
He earned it.
no argument there. No argument there. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you can't avoid that one. You can't do all of the things that he's claimed to have done and things without inviting some criticisms. But no,
Although we must say, like Steven Seagal, Joe Rogan did like a few minutes on this. He says that Joe Rogan said himself, that's a legit martial artist.
Absolutely.
That has done some really insane things and claimed things which are quite ludicrous, and potentially was involved in all manner of criminal shenanigans, according to various newspapers and whatnot.
Yes.
And I didn't get into that at all in the book. You said Steven Seagal, but it's actually there's probably just a few sentences about him in the book.
Yeah. I just happened to look at it, that section of it this morning. I haven't finished the entire book yet, but I've gotten quite a ways through it. But I was kind of looking through just to see if there was any hot topics or anything that I may have missed for questions in prepping for this podcast. And I just happened to find the Steven Seagal bit on there this morning, so I had to find a way to get that in here. Did you have anything else? Because I have some questions.
Yeah, no, go for your questions. Yeah.
This isn't this isn't so much about the book, but more about you. A question I've been really thinking about lately in regards to martial arts in general and people who teach. If you were going to show a brand new person the essence of your martial arts, like if you were having a conversation with a stranger on the street and you meet them and they're asking you questions, if you were going to show them one thing from your specific martial arts, something you know, what would it be to give them an idea or the essence of that style or region, or what would you show somebody to give them an idea of what it is?
Well, to begin with, I would consider who I'm facing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just assume that's a layperson, not a martial artist, because the options are endless if it's martial artist. Like, what's their background? Could be anything. A layperson, I would look at their structure, at their physical structure. And based on that structure, I'm going to decide, and their character, what I'm going to do. For example, if it's a big, strong person, they're going to be very impressed if I show them that I can move them around effortlessly, and I can have them grab me and get out of their grab or do something to them, and they hold my muscles and they see that I can remain very soft. That is always impressive for big, strong people.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you can encounter someone who is either shorter or skinnier or weaker or meek, is not that courageous. And for them, if you do the same, that might actually frighten them or intimidate them. And even if you're not intending for them to be your student, you might be conveying the wrong message, because they're feeling that they're going to carry with them and walk along later. If somebody asks them, well, what were those martial arts about? They're going to say, well, it's really scary. They're doing some really dangerous stuff, even though it's just nonsense, but that was their experience, right? If it's some people play games. So are you guys, do you know anything about Jungian personality psychology? Not Jungian personality types? No, I can't give that example. MBTI?
Yes. That I'm familiar with.
Okay, so some personality types, the way they do things, do not be I'm relatively still sitting here. Be like, see them like they're moving. You look at Bruce Lee, right? He's the sort of guy. He's a very movie kind of guy, right? So what is this about? This body language is like, give me something, I give you something. It's like they're throwing a ball, you catch the ball, you throw them back, very back to them. There's always a game. They're like this, right? So the whole Bruce Lee thing is, it's just an extension of his personality, of his character, of his personality type. So for those in the know, that's ESTP. Okay, for those who are familiar, ESTP. So that kind of personality type wants to play a physical game with you. So you need to outsmart them within their game. So in many ways, like an opponent, even if it's just a layperson you're showing something to, you need to match their body language and work with it. So if they're like moving like this, right? So you're like, what? They're moving, and you're like, you outmove them, like whoa, and in your face, right? And you're in their face, and then you touch their balls, right? Below, whilst you're in their face, right? They're like, whoa, did what do you do? To this, to that, and you outgame them in their own game, and then they're gonna respect that. Some people are like this. Other people are like, you're gonna touch them, and they're gonna be stiff. So they're used to being like, those are the people who do not make for exciting sexual partners. You can just tell, because if you're gonna try to do a technique with somebody and you have to lift their arm for them to do something, they're like, oh, well, those people are not like that. That's not charisma. Let's just say that. So, but with those people, the game they're playing is, can you engage me? Can you tap into that? Can you find that thing that actually gets me excited? And for them, they're actually, so ESTP, E is for like the personality type for Bruce Lee, that's E is for extroverted. All right?
Okay.
And for somebody like I just described, who's more of a, he's much slower, he's much like mellow,
more reserved,
and he might speak quite slowly. So what do you want to show me there? They might be like this. For them, they might be very introverted and everything is inside. So can you get into that thing inside of them and excite that? That can actually be much more difficult in terms of getting a positive reaction than the guy who's very fast and big and strong. Because at least the guy who's fast and big and strong, you can anticipate what's going to happen because you can see the game. The other guy's game is inside. So what am I going to do? I'm going to engage the other person with what matches their personality, their character, their body language, and make something out of that. But also, very importantly, know when it's just a lost cause to begin with. And that's also a skill as a martial arts teacher. When I was in, like nowadays, I'm more into recruiting Chinese medicine clientele. And that works very well for me. And within 5 minutes, like it can pick any person on the street that I can see is like limping, has some medical problem. It's easier here in Israel because it's a very warm country with warm climate, warm people. It's a very approachable culture. You can actually talk with strangers on the street and it's legit, and people do not think you're going to rob them or anything. It's a very friendly nation. So you can generate those conversations. And if I see somebody with a medical issue, I can get into a conversation with them. And let's just say it's a 30% chance, which is high, 30% chance that within 5 minutes, I'm going to have them schedule an appointment. It's that high, but it's also because medicine is about people suffering and they have a strong incentive to get that resolved. That they much, much, much stronger incentive than coming to a martial arts class. But way back when I used to do this in martial arts, you have to recognize that unlike with medicine, well, the majority of people are not good candidates to become students. And within 1 or 2 minutes of talking with them, you have to know, well, maybe they're excited about talking about martial arts, but it's just a waste of your time. They're going to drag you for another hour and it's not going to they're never going to come to class. You got to figure those people out too and know your way out of the conversation politely, because they still have to say good things about your school. They have to not be offended. And yeah, that's the salesmanship. It's an important skill, and you learn this by trial and error. I think, was it what was the name of that Who's that famous black actor who's in Django Unchained?
Oh,
Uh,
Samuel.
No, it's not Samuel. There's Samuel L. Jackson. This is young
Jamie
guy.
Foxx.
Jamie Foxx.
I think it was either Jamie Foxx or another fellow from his generation, like one of them. I saw an interview with him. He says, and he and several comedians I saw, like several people I saw over the years, said this: if you do door-to-door salesmanship, then in 2 years, after 2 years of practice, you can sell anything to anybody. And a lot of famous people, not a lot, but like there's enough famous people who actually did this when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
They did door-to-door salesmanship, which I could not even imagine. Never done anything like this. Must be so much more difficult than convincing anybody to come to a martial arts class or to come to get a Chinese medicine session. But I have to tell you, like you get some skills. It's legit.
You get some thick skin too. I've done it. It's incredibly difficult.
Right.
To be a complete stranger and knock on somebody's door and they're like, who that? You're already facing all sorts of objection immediately. You know, that's a whole topic for another podcast.
So to kind of circle back to what Dustin asked, the essence of what you would teach someone, it sounds like what you're saying, if I heard right, the essence is you really focus on the connection and how to connect with them in their own game. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we were talking about this in the context of salesmanship, but actually it's very true for martial arts classes as well. You have to learn to match your student. Now, I think there's a thin line between doing this and over catering to the student's wishes. Because what can easily happen is for the student to feel, oh, I can just ask for anything. I paid for this. So it's like a restaurant. I can choose whatever is on the menu. I'm paying for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's different. It's not a restaurant. And in Chinese medicine, getting treated by a Chinese medicine doctor or Western medicine doctor, or getting martial arts class is not the same as being in a restaurant. People got to understand that. And you have to place your limits. I'll give a very good example. I've had students who've asked me to study this or that part of the curriculum. In the more distant past, I was stringent. I was more like the majority of Western teachers who say we have a curriculum that goes from A to B to C to D, and you got to finish this before you get to that. And there are a few issues with this. First of all, people might be excited about some parts of the curriculum, but not so much other parts. For example, some people like weaponry and they don't like the empty-handed. Some people like empty-handed, but they don't like the weaponry. Some people prefer this. So there's different parts of the curriculum, and that's an issue. There's also the issue of people, well, they don't, well, never mind. I'll get to the example instead. There's students, what I did for the years was that I decided I'm going to do this more the Chinese way. There's a set curriculum. But within the set curriculum, I allow people once in a while to take a topic that's maybe slightly more advanced, use that topic for them, something they're excited about, to have them progress a little bit quicker, because this is something that if I teach them that, they're going to push it a little bit more with their personal training and coming more to classes and such. It has worked nicely. But the issue is that people are not necessarily reliable in taking advantage of those opportunities. So I have several times told students, well, I'm willing to teach you that, but you'd have to do this, work on that skill 3 times a week. Not necessarily in class, just 3 times a week in general. But what I wanted to say earlier, I remember now, is that if you just teach by a curriculum from A to B to C to D, what happens is you end up with certain types of skills and practice methods and things that you really like because they're more advanced, but you only get a very small number of people to learn them, and it might be like 10 or 20 years down the road, and that can be very boring for yourself as a teacher. Mm-hmm. So that's not good. Anyway, I was telling people, look, you can study this, but you have to put that much of an effort on a weekly basis. Did they do it? Yeah, it lasted about 3 or 4 weeks at most. And then at one point when they moved on to learning other things, they dropped whatever they're studying from me and beforehand, and they moved to the next thing. And like 2 years later, they're like, are you still doing this? No, stop doing that. But you promised that, like, I gave you that thing. I wanted you to keep it. It's important for you to progress. Yeah, well, I dropped it. And you know what? I would have forgiven them. Like, I do not practice every single thing I was ever taught by all of my 6 teachers. Okay, that's a given in martial arts. But I would have sort of forgiven that if they're still practicing at least every day. They're practicing, say, at least 2 hours every day and working on other things. Like, okay, at least you're making progress in your martial arts and you're serious and you're dedicated. But that's not what it is. So it can be you're trying to give them more because you love them, you care for them, you want them to be happy, you want more interest for yourself. That's a good selfish reason, and you're promoting them in the meanwhile. But it ends up being that, they're not even reliable in relation to themselves, so you can't rely on them either. And well, what can I say? That's part of the profession. You have to live with that. But and that's what I want to get to. Next time they come around and they say, I want to learn this, you have to tell them, well, do you abide by our agreement last time? They're like, yeah. And then they just go away. But I mean, it's sad, but that's how it is. You can't, like, if somebody's unreliable once, twice, you can't go for, like, you can't give him go a third time. Right?
Got to have your limits.
Yeah, you got to have your boundaries. Yeah, and it sounds like that's almost in a way teaching you or teaching the instructor, like saying like, hey, that's how you develop your character as an instructor with those students that may or may not be reliable, to say like, hey, and you're more refined to kind of see that when the new student walks in the door and you're like, oh, you're not even reliable to yourself. And you can see that in certain ways in that person. Obviously you hope they can overcome it, but it's some kind of like a flag that comes up.
Yeah, and it's not just in this way that you learn from your students. I've been telling people for many years, they think my students have taught me more than my teachers have. Indirectly, unintentionally, but they did. If you look at what your students are doing as a mirror of what you're trying to do with them, you learn a whole lot, not just about martial arts, but about life as well. And that's a good example. But also in the martial arts, what happens is you teach a technique, and there might be a little bit of an alignment in some angle, and you didn't pay attention to that. And as you're demonstrating, you realize it worked on the student, but it could have worked much better if I did this. And they're like, oh, because he resisted, now I realize I should actually explain it that way. That's the superior way to do the thing. Or sometimes, like, students are not aware that usually not aware that they can think of better ways to do things in their style and their art. But sometimes they would say, they'd be asking like naively, why can't we do it this way? And I let it go, and I just let them keep rolling with it, and they practice, and I look, and I think to myself, yeah, why can't we do it that? So I'm probably once every 2 or 3 months, somebody drops a sentence like that. And sometimes I might not even tell them that this was a correction for me, but it is. And I use my students to improve myself, but because I take them seriously. Because as people, as human beings, they're neither smarter or dumber than myself or yourselves. They're just less experienced, right? They're not professionals in this particular endeavor. So it doesn't mean that they can't have brilliant insights, and they do. Just have to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like teaching because showing somebody like you were saying, somebody who doesn't know, in quotations, doesn't know all of the aspects of it. They always, especially children, they'll come up with an idea or they'll come up with an observation that I hadn't even thought of. And it's like, oh, wow, I've been enlightened by this kid who doesn't even drive a car, who doesn't know what a bill is, yet alone they're showing me something that I haven't even thought of, and it's really fun to discover stuff like that and go, oh wow, okay, this is a whole concept I haven't even thought of in some cases. So
I'll provide you with an even more extreme example, like a story that came to mind from many years ago. I taught many self-defense classes for women, and there's this type of application that is often taught to women where they lay on. It's not something that usually happens to men, but women, when they lay on their backs and somebody is trying to, God forbid, rape them, and just the person standing just tries to come over them, and you teach them that they could lock a part of their foot or their ankle against the base of their leg, then press the other leg into their knee. Scissor-like movement.
Okay.
You use one foot to grab the bottom of the leg, and the other foot pushes against their knee. You do a scissor movement with a little bit of a circle, and you drop them as they try to get to you, and then you stand up and run away. And it's a very common type of application that is very useful for women's self-defense, because that's kind of situation they can get into if the person is not already on top of them. And it's always been very easy with most of my students and the women that I was teaching to show that application. But one time, this lady came, and this was, I think, her first or second ever martial arts class, and it's a women's self-defense class. And she was able to hold her legs very firmly. She just had the best alignment to stand a certain way when I was trying to use that application on her. Now, I could take her down, but there was this problem. If I was just pulling and pushing, she would not budge. But if I had to actually take her down, I would have to kick her, and if I did, even in the confines of the class, I was going to damage her knee. So she was just standing there like, not going to move. And I was pushing, pulling with my legs, like I showed them earlier, which would work on most people in most situations. But if it's not, you have to kick the knee a little bit. And there was this impossible situation wherein I couldn't show that this works, because if I did, I was going to damage her. It was just for a split second. Like the whole thing took 3-4 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And I just got up and showed something else. We were at the end of it anyway. But that made me think about a lot of these impossible situations in life that we grapple with. Sometimes, for example, my wife was just here, some minutes ago, with one's spouse. Wife wants to do a certain thing. You're in disagreement, but there's no other way, like, to keep the household harmonious. There's just no other way but to let something happen that you might not chill with, but life sort of forces you into that corner, and you have to accept it. And it's actually through engagements like this with students, not just beginners, sometimes like where you find that there is no good solution. There's only an okay solution, or there is the least worst solution that you have to deal with. Because when I was demonstrating that technique on that lady, all the other ladies were looking, and they couldn't understand. Now, I couldn't stop and explain what I did to you. They wouldn't understand anyway. They're complete beginners. So I likewise, I had a situation like this with a lady that had a few self-defense classes, and she was very good in the class, even against considerable resistance, even from men. But then she came home after maybe 3 classes, and she had a boyfriend who was just this massive guy. Guy is like 6'5", probably like 280 pounds, and she's this like small petite woman, and she's had 3 classes, and she's trying all manner of techniques on him, and it's not working. Because obviously it's her boyfriend. She couldn't do anything that's gonna really hurt him. She's also not gonna try. Everything that told her she needs to do, if she can't get this to work, gonna grab his underside. Is she gonna like bite him? Is she gonna poke him in the eye? She's not gonna. So she comes back to fourth class and she's like, "It's my last class. I'm not coming anymore because I tried all this on my boyfriend. Didn't work."
Mm-hmm.
And you have to acknowledge, hey, I know my stuff's good, but sometimes there are impossible scenarios that you just cannot. There's no way to explain to people sometimes that life is imperfect. But it teaches you to accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Very cool.
Did you have any other questions?
I have more, but I know you had bookmarked a couple of things in the book that you wanted to go over.
Yeah, let's go for the book.
Yeah. I got a couple spots that I had, I kind of skipped around in the book and I found some really, really good stuff that I marked and I wanted to talk about. Let me find it right now.
While you're looking up that,
Yeah, you got a question?
have a thing. So you break down the different types of schools from like sports schools to self-defense and there's like 6 different types.
Mm-hmm.
My feeling on that was, and that was like the different ideologies. I believe that was the term you used. My feeling is that sometimes the lines can be blurred a little bit, much like personal politics. You have like right and left, but sometimes people don't always align completely with one side or the other.
Yeah.
So do you, two-part question. One, what type when you were running your school full time, what political spectrum is, according to your book, did your school fall under? And then do you find that sometimes or often the lines can be blurred between the different types?
Yeah. So as to your question, generally, I have tackled this in the book. There is, after I explained the different types of martial arts schools, I also discussed the ways in which many schools can combine. A very famous example, you have a lot of BJJ schools that are pure sports gyms. But then you have certain Gracie academies from the Gracie family that are sort of a partially traditional dojo, which is also a sports gym.
Okay.
And that would also frequently depend on what is the agenda of the teacher rather than even the style or the lineage. So I think the teacher is often the big determining factor here. And you said, what is the political agenda? I would more so call it the social agenda. The politics are inside of the schools. Yeah, what is the social agenda of the school? So my school has always been a wuguan. Wuguan in Chinese martial hall. That's the sort of the Chinese equivalent of a dojo. Both are explained very well in the book. Explain what is a traditional dojo, what is a traditional wuguan, what are the differences between them, of which there are many. And the wuguan aspires to be more akin to a family than having a bureaucratic hierarchy that you sometimes, not always, see in some of, say, the Japanese dojos. I think of, say, the Honbo dojo, like the headquarters dojo of the Yoshinkan organization. That's a famous Aikido organization in Japan. It's very hierarchical, very bureaucratic. And in the Chinese styles, very often the wuguan is a system that's more family oriented. So I am the head of the family, but not even a godfather type of way head of the family, but rather in a very warm, supportive way. So I try to be there for my students as a father would be for his children. Now, it doesn't mean that my students are my children. I do not consider my students as my children, but I try my best to relate to them emotionally, to care for them as if they were, especially if they've been with me for many years or they are indoor students of mine. And that also shows the difference between the wuguan and the other types of schools. In the traditional wuguan, there's the idea that there is outdoor student and indoor student. Now, they actually meant that physically. In ancient times, what would happen is the traditional household in China would be an estate or a mansion. So imagine somebody has a villa, and the villa is surrounded by a wall. So between the villa and the wall that surrounds it, they have a courtyard. The villa is usually a square or rectangle. It's surrounded by a squarish or rectangular wall in between, and there's a courtyard between the villa and the wall. And there's also the countryside, the nature, the dirt road, whatever beyond the wall. So when people start practicing, they are the regular student. The teacher would step outside the wall. That's his household. You teach them someplace outside the wall, next to the wall, or in the grove, or in some temple, or wherever. But it's gonna not be in his actual living quarters, in his premises. You get to be an indoor student means, or they call it, sometimes they use different names, sometimes interchangeably, but let's just say enter the gate student. Why do you call it enter the gate student? Because now you're of a small group of students that are not taught outside the wall. You were led through the gate. You entered the gate, the mansion. Now you're in the inner courtyard. You're taught there. Then could be an indoor student. That's somebody who's even more deep inside. You're privy to actually enter the household, be trained inside the household. And then there's usually one to three people who are the inheritors of the system. They're literally, they can go anywhere in the house on their own. They are literally like people who were born in that house. That's a very traditional framework. Like usually nowadays, what we have is indoor and outdoor. That's it. You have regular students. You have students that after a certain number of years, through a relationship that they build with the teacher, if they've proven that they're trustworthy, they're serious, they're dedicated, then through often a special ceremony, not always, they have to be the indoor students. So now they're closer to the teacher. For example, maybe the teacher did not reveal their political opinions to their student. Bless you, Dustin.
Thank you. Apologize.
But then when you're the indoor student, they're just going to be open with you like they're with their wife. They're going to tell you everything about their politics, maybe their state of health, maybe their issues with their children, everything, because you're like family. You talk openly about everything, good and bad. And you have to take care of them as if they were your children. They have to take care of you as if you were their father. So this reciprocation, I'll give two examples for. When we have a social gathering, say we go to a restaurant, the students pay for my meal at a restaurant. But then, if a student is sick, they have any physical issue or whatnot, I would treat them with my Chinese medicine. There is reciprocation here. So the goal is to create a system of reciprocation that's completely harmonious. We don't have, like I go with the students, I don't have to tell them I'm not paying. I'm just not paying. That's well known. That's just how the custom is in China. Sorry, there is a little white tiger here. Hello.
Awesome.
And likewise, if they need help, they don't need to feel that they need to ask for anything special. They can just tell me, oh, I need help, and I'll help them. I'll make the time to help them.
It's a harmonious system, I guess, or a philosophy. That's very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and that kind of goes into one of the things that I had flagged marked in the book that I wanted to talk about. It was the page 342 with the the knife seller. You know, the knife seller brings you in, and if you're a regular customer in his shop, you know, yeah, you know, and he'll show you, okay, this is what I have to sell. But I mean, if you're just a walk-in person walking in for the first time, but if you're a regular customer, then he's like, hey, you know, eventually he's going to take you back and say, hey, here's my special collection that's for sale. Right? So kind of very similar.
Yeah. Don't look at that stuff. Come back here. I was saying, like, don't look at that stuff. That's for the casuals. Like, come back here and let me show you the good stuff.
Yeah.
You're talking about this thing that's called guanxi in Chinese culture, guanxi, which is totally misunderstood by Westerners. Because I love telling this like 2-sentence story that one time a person comes to Mark Twain, like famous author, and the person is wealthy, and he tells Mark Twain, "Well, if you're so smart, how come you're not rich?" And Mark Twain immediately replies, "You're so rich, how come you're not smart?" and that little story encapsulates a whole lot about American culture, because in America, and you see, I like Joe Rogan. I watch a lot of Joe Rogan stuff. I don't necessarily agree with him in a lot of martial arts stuff, but I like the guy as a person. And what Joe Rogan says a lot on his podcast is he sees something brilliant that excites him, and he would say, "How come this is not well known? How come this guy didn't get rich selling this? If they have this," like he talks about, like, oh, these Tibetans with their technology, like internal technology to warm their bodies. Like there's a thing called tumo breathing in Tibetan meditation, Tibetan traditions, where they do a special breathing method that allows them to greatly raise the temperature of their bodies so they can sit or lay or walk or run in the snow almost naked. It's a thing. It's like there's probably videos on YouTube demonstrating this is well proven. And it's something that, I mean, Wim Hof is based on this. Like the whole Wim Hof phenomenon is based on this.
Yeah.
But in Tibet, in Tibetan traditions, they go way farther than what because Wim Hof is commercialized stuff. Good stuff, commercialized. Anyway, so Joe Rogan hears about it. He's like, oh my God, people can just warm their bodies and walk in the snow. How come nobody's making millions and millions off it? And it goes exactly to that Mark Twain thing. Because Joe Rogan is very American. And again, I like the guy. He thinks like like a stereotypical American. And the Tibetan would think, like a Chinese would think, like, you kidding me? There's no sum of money you can give me, and that's true. It's gonna make me teach anybody this stuff. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. That's the answer. That's it. Because it's cultural principles. It's like where we're talking politics, right? Yeah. So Zelensky comes to the White House, and J.D. Vance. So people watching 100 years from now know Zelensky is the president of the Ukraine, and J.D. Vance is the vice president of the United States at this time. And J.D. Vance scolds him because the United States has given a lot of aid to the Ukraine, and J.D. Vance in front of cameras, people think it's right or wrong, doesn't matter. I'm just saying what happened. He tells Zelensky, "Have you said thank you even once? Why haven't you said thank you?" Like, this is because why is it? I think is a brilliant political move on J.D. Vance's part. Why? Because for most Americans, if you go into somebody's house and it's called the White House, it's the president's house. You go into somebody's house and they helped you, you say,
thank you.
Because that's American culture, of course. So you see, J.D. Vance, you could not convince him with any sum of money that Zelensky shouldn't have said thank you. In the same manner, you couldn't take like the secrets from a Tibetan or a Chinese master and have him sell it for any sum of money if that's his principles, right? Some would sell it for money. Definitely a lot of people would sell it for money, but some would not because
that's their principle.
You didn't say thank you because that's what they believe in. You know, you're not going to move them. That's their culture. So the thing is, in China, there's this thing called guanxi. Guanxi just means relationship. You have to build a relationship with a person for them to give you all their goods. Step into a store, you don't have any relationship, you're going to get the highest price. You come back like the fifth time, you get a better price. You come back again, you talk with the seller a little bit, you know them, they give you a better discount, you can bargain better. Eventually, you don't have to bargain, you get the best price that they can give you. And when you're best friends, he's going to take you to the back of the store and show you goods that he can sell, but he doesn't show other people, which is exactly what Tyler was talking about. And we Westerners, especially Americans, we feel like, this blows the mind. This guy's crazy. You're telling me he can actually sell more, but he keeps it in the back, not even showing this to people just so he can only show it to his best buddies and say it to them? What the heck, man? This doesn't make sense. And for them, that's all the sense in the world. Why? Because they need and want a harmonious society. They want you. It's not like I give you something and you give me something. We got that shake hands. But for real, for real, like really have some connection before the something of greatest worth is given. Otherwise, for them, it's no different than prostitution, and they don't want to be a prostitute. That's how they see it, and it's the same in martial arts. That's part of the problem. It's explained in the book, but succinctly, a lot of Chinese martial arts teachers, usually people of Chinese descent, and mostly people who were born in China, were educated with that culture, they're not going to give everything they have unless the student is not just willing, is artist, is hardworking, perseveres, and shows loyalty, and is trustworthy, and has been with them for many years, etc., and has become an indoor student and whatnot. And he's got, and the thing is, it's got to be organic, it's got to be harmonious. Sometimes they're not going to tell you they're testing you. I do this with my. Sometimes I'm not telling. I can say now, for example, we are in a war. Yeah, I'm not getting just war, unjust war, who's right, who's wrong, doesn't matter right now. My country is in a war. I've spent over 100 days of my life, full days, as a volunteer, no pay, just expenses on fuel and equipment and whatnot, driving to very dangerous places to support my country because I believe it, on principle, on a matter of principle. And I've told my students, you're martial artists. You're warriors. You're supposed to be, at least. This is a war. And what does a warrior do in a war? He does something. Now, regrettably, because of circumstances, I cannot carry a firearm in this war. I would have if they let me, but they don't. What do? I don't treat people. I do what I can. All right? That's noble too. And there's a whole lot of volunteer opportunities in any war. And you don't even have to help you don't feel you want to help the troops. You can work with victims. You can work with the injured. You can do a whole lot. You can work with farmers. We are in lack of helping hands with farmers down south next to the war zone. So I told my students, hey, you want to call yourselves martial artists, you have to go. And they all did something. But some of them only did it very, very little. Very little.
Now,
and I would remember that, not as a grudge. I love them all the same. So I've not at all changed my attitude towards my students because of it, not at the least. But I remember in a time of great need, and great distress for our nation, if they stood up for what's right or not, and how much. I remember.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You were going to say something. Go ahead.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Sorry for just stopping you here, there, Trailer. I just have to. I want to clarify. I wouldn't have expected the same for an American to do for, say, the Vietnam War or the Iraq War or the war in Afghanistan. And pardon my cat who's meowing there. She's hunting socks.
No worries.
So it's really not like, I wouldn't draw that comparison at all, because some people might feel like, is he saying that I should, like my father should have gone to Nam? No, it's not the same. We're having an existential war. The war zone is an hour and a half drive from my house.
Yeah.
The war zone is
it's literally in your backyard.
Yeah. The war zone is 5 minutes to 4-hour drive from anywhere in Israel. So, and our enemies, again, who's right, who's wrong, that's not for this discussion, but our enemies, there's something that's clear because they say it on every single screen they can, is we want to kill you all. If we win, we're killing you all. So in that sort of situation, that's not like now. That's not like the Iraq War. That's not Afghanistan. This is very different. I'm saying this is a situation where you expect any able-bodied person to do something. So that's what I'm striving at. So I'm not guilting any Americans here. That's not the same scenario.
You know,
sorry, Tyler,
no, that's perfect. I really like that philosophy. I once, I don't know if you're familiar with Jocko Willink at all.
Jocko Willink,
yeah, Willink. Sorry, I butchered his name. I once, he does a contest every year called the Deaf Reset, where you discipline equals freedom, reset. You do a bunch of different stuff: drink water, exercise, sleep right, read a book.
You forgot his most important. Set up your bed in the morning.
Yes.
Make your bed.
One of the in the middle of the first one I did before he exploded and got super popular, you could tweet him and he would tweet back if he had time. If he was not in the middle of stuff, he wouldn't. He didn't ignore you. He really is good about that. But I was sick and I'm like, I don't feel good. I don't feel like exercising or whatever. I can't remember what it was. And he's like, that's fine. Just do what you can. And I really liked the way you put that. You know, you don't necessarily have to pick up a gun and go fight, but you can farm, or you can help with victims, or you can bring food. There's something that you can do, and everybody can do something. You don't have to do everything.
Contribute, yeah.
Yeah, you can contribute in some way, some form. And it doesn't, you know, we don't even have to be talking about war. We could just be talking about a family at home. One of the things I teach when I teach the children, or I don't teach, I ask them what they did to help out around the house. What's your homework? I give them homework from me, and it doesn't do anything with martial arts or school. It's what did you do around the house? What did you do to help out? You should be a contributing member of something. And I really like the way you put that. That was really cool. So I had to add my 2 cents there. So.
Like what you were saying, like going around and yeah. That's a good point. Going around and helping out, treating soldiers. What I was going to say is, now I know when I visited Israel, I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of the people that I was on the trip with were Jews, and that had, you know, born in Israel, served in the IDF in Israel, and then came to America. Did you serve in the IDF, or was that not a requirement?
Yes, of course. Despite myself sounding as if I was born in the States or elsewhere, which is that is English speaking, Israeli, born and raised. I have lived abroad. I lived 6 months in China and 2 years in Canada and 8 months in Mexico. But overall, the majority of my life I've lived here. And by law, we have an obligatory service. So unless a lot of people go see a psychiatrist, right? Get something that way, or they get exempt due to crooked politics, like they can declare they're ultra-Orthodox Jewish and they're part of a yeshiva and get some. That's a whole complicated topic. But overall, like the majority of Israelis I enlisted. I went through infantry boot camp with the Golani Brigade, famous infantry brigade. And then my medical profile was lowered due to an injury temporarily. So I was transferred from infantry to the Israeli police force. So for nearly 3 years, the 2 years and 8 months, I served with the Israeli police in the capacity of an investigator and an interrogator with the Tel Aviv Central Major Crimes Unit.
Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, and regrettably, they do not have a reserve service, unlike the military. So although I really wanted to come back for, 1 or 2 or 3 weeks every year and work as a policeman again, they wouldn't let me. It's difficult because once you're a policeman, you're privy to all sorts of information about the criminal underworld. And they can't just have you as a civilian and then come back, be privy to that again, and go back. It's
you can't dip your toe in that water.
Yeah, it's you're either in it or you're not. So that's why I got they wrote me off as exempt for life from reserve service. Most people are exempt for life from reserve service, except for infantry. Oh. Infantry and some other duties, they might serve until the age of 40. And then beyond that, only if they would like to volunteer. Wow. But I got an exemption, which is why I had to volunteer.
Okay.
Now, with your martial arts experience, right, a lot of that, your training came from like your civilian side rather than military, right? Or did you do a lot of martial arts, Krav Maga, hand-to-hand in the IDF?
It's just a stereotype that people have. People fancy Krav Maga so much. And of course, there are many fantastic Krav Maga instructors in Israel, in the United States, and worldwide. And it's like it is a big thing. However, here in Israel, Krav Maga is not nearly as much a sensation as it is in the States. It's like, think about college wrestling. You talk with Americans about college wrestling, it's like, yeah, college wrestling, what's to it? It's something that people do. That's how people perceive Krav Maga over here.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
maybe it's even less glorious, probably, because it's not as common as college wrestling. It's not in every school and every college like it is in the States. And then Krav Maga in the military is, unfortunately, it's a joke. It is a joke. Regular infantry, like I went through, regular boot camp, I'd say probably no more than 12, 14 classes in total. And the classes focus on just pure aggression. They're not even trying to teach you proper technique or discipline or anything. It's all fitness exercises, which is redundant because you're doing fitness all day long. Infantry boot camp is just extra fitness. Hitting bags really hard, being super aggressive. They have drills like there are 10 guys, your friends, they all have very, very thick protective equipment. They surround you like a crowd, and you have to break out. Once you break out, somebody else gets in. It's all very violent, very aggressive. People get injured very often despite having heavy protective gear because it's very chaotic, and nearly everybody there are beginners, martial artists that don't know what they're doing, and the people that actually oversee this, it's supposed to be that all Krav Maga instructors have to prove that they're at least black belt level at something before becoming Krav Maga instructor in the IDF. I don't know that it's upheld always, but it's supposed to be like that. And then once they get in the IDF, they go for boot camp, and then they do like a 3-month Krav Maga course. So the people overseeing your Krav Maga classes are 20 or 21-year-olds that have gone for like a 3-month course, and they had a black belt at something, but who knows what that was, and the Krav Maga is not the same. So least professional environment you can imagine, and the whole point is it's exceedingly rare in modern times that you're gonna have to fight to the death hand to hand with somebody, because even if you get face to face with somebody, they have friends or you have friends or you both have friends around. And so it happens. It has happened in this war too, but I can probably count on one hand the amount of instances in the entire war here. That's like over a year and a half of war that this has happened. It's very uncommon. So they just want you to be as aggressive as possible when you meet that other guy. And they're not trying, you don't have time to practice even what you learned in the classes. So it's all redundant. The special forces get better training and more classes. But, if I got 12 to 14 classes, maybe they're lucky to get 30 or 40 in a year and a half of, basic and advanced training. It's not a lot. And it's really not what people think. And when you consider, if people know what you actually go through in infantry boot camp and then advanced training, you realize there's really not too much time for Krav Maga in there, because you're supposed to get certified in the usage of many different types of weaponry, machinery, often vehicles. So you have heavy machine guns and light machine guns of several types. And special forces learn to operate the handguns as well. You have grenades. You have grenade launchers. You have shoulder missiles, right? Like modern day bazookas. It's called tow missiles and others. Some people get certified like on M4s with grenade launchers on them. And then you have to learn first aid at a very high level. Even the non-medics, like first aid in the IDF, is very solid training. Very solid training in first aid. Also, the shooting, very good. It's quite a whole lot of a difference as compared with the Krav Maga.
Yeah.
The Israeli soldiers do know how to shoot very well, and you spend a lot of time shooting, and you shoot laying down, half prone, crouching, walking, running, from vehicles. You shoot from every single position and scenario, and you're literally running all day long. So you're barely sitting or standing. You need to go to the kitchen to eat or to work there. You run. You have to anywhere you go, you go to the first aid class, you run. Everywhere you run. So how much of that could actually and soldiers have to operate the kitchen. So in Israel, it's like a people's army. So it's like a camp for the Boy Scouts more so than U.S. Army. So you're an infantryman, but there's a certain professional class in the kitchens and professional chefs, but most of the work is done by the infantry soldiers. They also clean the restroom. They do everything in boot camp. You do all of that. How much time there is to actually do Krav Maga? Not much. But you do get certified very well on all the rest of it.
Yeah, which makes sense in a way. I mean, it is a shooting war.
Yeah.
Everyone's got guns, so you need to. That's where the focus needs to be. I would assume.
Yes.
And not to mention like working together, teamwork, squad-based goals, all of those other things on top of
and
it.
Navigation.
Yeah.
So everybody has a GPS nowadays, but they teach you to navigate by the stars. You have to know how to build shelter. You have to know how to roll in different types of terrains till you bleed heavily. That's some serious training. I'd say there's nothing that I've done in my life that was as hard as infantry boot camp with the IDF. It was very, very hard. And the psychological is as hard as the physical. And being food deprived and sleep deprived does not help. You don't get to eat well. The Army commands is you're supposed to get 6 hours of sleep minimum a night. We were lucky to get 4. For 4 months, you essentially sleep for 2 to 4 hours. So that's very harsh.
Yeah.
But you're young and you're stupid and you do it.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. Well, Jonathan, we've kept you here for a long time.
Yeah.
This has been enlightful. It's been great. I really appreciate you reaching out and your book is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. One final question before we go. What's next for you?
What is next? A lot of things, actually. I am working on probably 10 different book projects at the same time. One of those is going to be hopefully released later this year, the biography of a very famous martial arts master, a good friend of mine who just passed away this past November, Grandmaster Keith Kensbeth. And it's going to be a massive tome about his life that I've been working on for several years with him, originally before he passed. Now with his family and organization. It's going to be that. There's going to be a few books on Chinese medicine. There's a really large book that I'm writing about martial arts that's going to be in Hebrew. But nearly all of my books are in English. So I wanted to leave something for the Hebrew-speaking martial arts community as well. I'm looking to do similarly to my previous books, I have drafts for books. One's going to be like the Martial Arts Teacher 3. So I have Martial Arts Teacher 1 and 2. It's actually there's 2 second edition. And the third one, I want to do something different. So the Martial Arts Teacher is also a book of mine, very popular, that's available on Amazon. That book focuses on how to be a martial arts teacher and how to build a martial arts community of students. And it's focused on the philosophy of teaching martial arts as well as on the how-to, but how-to more psychological, sociological, and communal, and the roots of like teaching martial arts and traditional martial arts. The Martial Arts Teacher 3 that I'm working on is going to come sometime in the future. I want to change perspective and actually focus on the nitty-gritty of what do you do in the class itself. How do you teach people footwork? How do you get people to understand how to practice on their own? What kind of health guidance can you give them? That book gets very specific on the technicalities of being a martial arts teacher. How you do everything in class. How you teach children versus adults. The other book was more about, say, how do you build a relationship with students? How do you retain loyalty? How do you treat a student who was once your student and then who's gone is now coming back? How do you manage big seminars? How do you visit other martial arts schools? How do you teach your students to visit other martial arts schools? So more on the, again, psychological, communal, philosophical levels and everything around that. Then new book, more so like the actual in-class action.
More nuts and bolts.
Yeah, and there are definitely a few books coming about traditional Chinese medicine and other topics. And my biggest project that I'm occupied with almost every single day nowadays is my war memoir. I am writing a memoir about my experiences throughout the war, treating the soldiers. And there's a lot to it. It's part a war memoir and part telling of the war from a very personal perspective. And it's going to put, in, let's just say, probably over 90% of the information, if not over 95% of the information in that war memoir are things that one cannot come across on the news media if they looked up stuff about that war, about the Iron Swords War. This is going to be something very different because I have boots on the ground. I've been inside of Gaza. I've been by the Gaza border at all of the outposts and all of the bases there. I've been where the slaughters and massacres have taken place. Talked to people who are survivors of different slaughters and massacres. I've interviewed soldiers who fought on the first day of the war and throughout the war, with numerous soldiers who fought in Gaza, who fought in Lebanon, who fought in Syria. I know exactly what's going on. I'm an expert on the history of the region, and I can talk about this as somebody whose life is literally bound by this event. Somebody who wakes up oftentimes at 4 a.m. with war alarms. I have to go down the shelter. There's some missiles coming from Yemen, country that I don't know anybody from, with people who just decided they want to kill me with ballistic missiles, even though I have nothing to do with them. This is very surreal. Very surreal. I don't know if anybody like in the States asked themselves, like, why is there a group in Yemen shooting missiles in Israel, even though Israel never, it's like 1,500 miles away and there's no border with Yemen. It's like no historical or political relation or whatnot. It's really weird. Yeah. It's really weird to be like to awake from your sleep, like knowing there's some Yemenites just shot a hypersonic missile. I'd be like, what, why is this happening? It's so weird. I'm like, we're not like, I have no angst against the Yemenites. Like, what's going on even? So the world is weird right now. And how it's all about how I traveled across the country, and treated the soldiers with Chinese medicine, how I treated them, what kind of conditions they suffered from. What happens to people in the war? What happens to especially infantrymen? And the fact that nobody is treating those people like they go to medic, what they get? Paracetamol. Like, what can they do for them? Like, if it's not a medical emergency, if they're not being evacuated to a hospital, somebody's got a neck ache, a shoulder problem, a backache, your knee doesn't work. Okay, they're vomiting. I had that too. Vomiting, diarrhea, they caught a flu or whatnot. Think somebody could help? Nobody could help. There are infantrymen in the war. Who could help them? Me. Bizarrely, me, the volunteer who just arrived on the scene almost spontaneously, should not be there. Now I have to solve this. And it's not just me, of course. There, at the beginning of the war, thousands of volunteers from the health professions, aside from Western medicine, were doing this. Now, probably just a few dozens of us left because people got tired. All of those volunteers are over in their 50s and 60s or even older.
Wow.
So I'm a youngster amongst them. Like not a lot of young people. Usually people who are semi-retired, already retired, so they have more time, right? So yeah, that's it's a crazy experience. Like people that I have those hypersonic missiles coming. I also was in Gaza, near Gaza, and I had mortar shells sent my way. I had like eight seconds.
Jeez.
And it's You think time goes down in sparring? I tell you, when the mortar alarm comes up and you know you have 8 seconds, that's when time really slows down.
I bet.
Really, it's like Matrix level stuff. Really slow. Like you only see what you need to do. There's only one, like you see that there's no shelter even. Like on those outposts, you'd have like a giant concrete tube you just run into, and you see the tube. And I saw, like, I had colleagues of mine who were just like doing acupuncture on some soldiers, and the soldiers just ran with the needles. They didn't care. Like, person with 20 needles in there, they just run.
We'll deal with that later.
I saw those playgrounds when I was there, that the playgrounds for the kids that are actually double as a shelter. You know, some of those I saw in the country.
Oh yeah. That's all over the country. So they put these big slabs of concrete, rectangular slabs. It's like they're the size of a small room, and that's a shelter. If somebody's gonna shoot a rocket or a missile or a mortar at you, you just get in, and even if it hits you head on, you're probably not gonna get injured too bad. Gonna be fine.
Wow.
It's just thick. It's like you're talking concrete that's 4 or 5 feet thick. So not a lot of things can go through that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty safe. But what happened in the beginning of the war, sadly, was that a lot of people hid in those. Hamas knew they would hide in those, and then they came and they slaughtered them in the shelters. Those became death traps. So you see, it goes both ways. War has taught us a lot of things, Israelis, and kudos to Hamas. As vile as they are, they're very evil and malevolent, but they did their homework. And that also teaches us a lesson about martial arts. You do your homework, and you can be in an army of 3,000 thugs on Toyotas, and you can still beat the Middle East's strongest military for the first 24 hours. Not really, but well, let's just say they beat us for the first 12 or 14 hours. That's quite a thing, because nobody was prepared, and you were exceptionally prepared. And if this was a fight on the street, they would win. If we were the big guy and they were the small guy, they would. If this was a fight, they would win because they did their homework.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Wow. By the way, it could have been much worse, because they did their homework too good. They thought all the rest of our enemies were going to join in on the same day. Didn't happen. For some reasons, didn't happen. But imagine we could have been invaded the same from like several different fronts. So, yeah, so doing your homework on the battlefield or martial arts, that works. And you see that. I'll give you some statistics. Another example. We lost 200 soldiers in this war, Israeli side. We had a long ceasefire for about 2 months. After the ceasefire ended on both sides, I think we've lost, for the next 3 months, we've only lost, I think, about 5 people. Wow. Now imagine, we're waging a full-scale war here. They've lost maybe 4,000, 5,000 more people. We've lost 5. That's doing your homework. That's the only thing that changed, that we took 2 months and we came in more prepared.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And you asked what's next for me. That there's the books, and there is more volunteering, because this war is sadly everybody wants the war to end. Nobody wants wars to continue. We all want the war to end. We don't know when this is going to happen. So there's more volunteering for me. And my plan is to hopefully in about 2 years' time to open a big place of a Chinese medicine clinic with a martial arts school, all in the same location.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, like in olden times, like a classic, like in a kung fu movie.
Right on. Very cool.
Big posters like that everywhere.
Yes. That's beautiful. That's really awesome. Well, thank you again. I hope to hear from you again with the next book. Thank you for taking the time and doing this with us. This was, like I said earlier, enlightening. It was just a ton of fun. So I appreciate you. Stay safe out there. Keep doing what you're doing because it's awesome. Oh, before I forget, where can people reach out and find your book and your school and more about you?
All right. So if you'd like to reach out, I'm available at jonathan.bluestein@gmail.com. So that's Jonathan like Jonathan, JONATHAN .Bluestein. Bluestein is spelled BLUESTEIN. Jonathan.bluestein@gmail.com. You can look up our official website. That is bluejadesociety.com. Blue like the color blue, jade like the stone jade, society like a society. Bluejadesociety.com. And you can just write down my name on Amazon.com or any Amazon affiliate websites, and my books would be listed there under my name.
I will be sure to put links to all of your books and website on our description for this podcast.
Thank you so very much. And also, by the way, you can write my name in the YouTube search. I have a YouTube channel with plenty of really fascinating martial arts materials, including a lot of videos of our martial arts by all of my teachers and other honorable masters that contributed stuff to my channel, and other interviews I've done and lectures. You're most welcome to visit. Thank you so very much, both Tyler and Dustin. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
It was
Yeah.
awesome.